Everybody. It is now 9:32, so we're going to get started. I want to say thank you for joining us. I am Amanda Jo Nicholson, your Vice President of Member Services with the Winter Haven Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to the Tips to Pivot Your Business to Remote Working webinar. Everybody has a lot going on today, but we are absolutely delighted to bring to you this webinar in partnership with your fellow chamber member, Solid Rock Consulting. During the webinar, we're going to hear from Solid Rock Consulting's owner and CEO, Juanita Coley. Juanita, I'm sorry, I'm just admitting more people to the webinar. Juanita has extensive experience leading corporations of all sizes through periods of change. She also has worked with them in embracing new ways of working and helping them maximize their potential. With Juanita today, we also have Dr. Lynn Johnson, who is a senior business consultant specializing in human resources and business management for small to medium-sized businesses. Before we go on, I want to just run over a couple of ground rules for the meeting. Coordinating comments today for the webinar will be my colleague, our Chamber's Marketing Coordinator, Rachel Lawrence. And for ease of sound on the call, everybody, as I said before, everybody's mic is muted. We do want to encourage questions, and there will be time for questions, but we're going to utilize the chat function of the Zoom webinar. And so if you want to submit a question, please hit the little chat button at the bottom of your screen and type your questions, and then Rachel will relay those to Juanita and Lynn as we see fit. So without further ado, I would like to say thank you again to Juanita and to Dr. Johnson, and I will give you the floor, ladies. Oh, sorry, Juanita, hang on. There you go.
Zoom technology, right? Setting your business up to succeed in a remote environment. And these are some of the things that we have to work through. And these are not even necessarily challenges. It's just getting used to a new environment, right? So thank you so much, Amanda Jo, for the opportunity, and the Chamber. Rachel, thank you so much for being with us here today. Dr. Lynn is on. She'll be helping me present to you all this morning. So I want to just thank everyone for joining, and we'll just hop right in, right? I believe in, being punctual and on time, and just, getting to the good stuff. This webinar is really designed to talk to startups, small businesses, and even medium-sized organizations that may have the majority of their staff in an on-site environment, and the technology phase that we're in, or this age that we're in, with some of the challenges that we're dealing with, even with COVID, I think is a very relevant thing to call on right now to kind of showcase why it's important that we have a remote environment, or some of our staff in a remote, or with the capabilities to work remote. So we'll just hop right in and dive right in. So Amanda, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. Our agenda for this webinar, we'll talk through the different technology needs that you need if you're looking to have a remote environment. We'll talk about when and who remote work is for. We'll also talk through motivating a remote workforce, training a remote workforce, and then policies and best practices. So that's our agenda items for this specific webinar. Again, if you have questions, we would love to answer those questions. Just put those in the chat as Amanda mentioned, right? All right, go ahead, Amanda. So a little bit about myself before we hop right in. I've spent pretty much my entire career doing workforce management, capacity plannings for companies and some large companies like United Healthcare, Liberty Medical, some Southwest Airlines, just large companies, right? As well as companies that you may not know, smaller companies like Carrington Mortgage, and smaller companies even around here locally. So that's what my background and career choice has been, is that I do workforce management, capacity planning, and helping organizations really identify high value opportunities, address very critical challenges within their workforce, and transform their operations. So that's a little bit about me professionally. Lynn, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning to everyone. I do want to say thank you to Amanda and Rachel for this great opportunity that you have provided to Solid Work this morning. As they have stated, I'm Dr. Johnson, and I come to you with some experience. If I would say my career experience would be in the corporate arena for well over 15 years, and then I kind of transitioned myself into academia. And so I've been in academia for about 8 years. And so what I bring to the table is not only my experience of working in a large corporation, but also managing in that setting, and then from the academic standpoint of managing a business and consulting small businesses in the local area. My knowledge and experience helps not only the corporate arena, but definitely the small and medium-sized businesses. And I work close with them to determine what needs best suit them so that their employees perform at a high level for their organization, so that they can achieve their goals as an organization. And that's what I bring to the table. So human resource management, that's my specialty area, because I just love people. And so I look forward to just sharing with you some information that I have this morning. Thanks, Juanita.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Yeah, I'm looking forward to your slides. Go ahead, Amanda. So can you all imagine a workforce, like in your current environment, and can you imagine a world where 90%, right, 90% of staff are in a remote and virtual environment? Can you imagine that? You know, I know, you know, with COVID, that has been our, you know, like we've had to shift really and pivot really quickly and respond really quickly. Some states and cities and counties more delayed than others, right? But can you imagine post-COVID, right, an environment or a culture where it's the thing is to be in a virtual environment, right? You do your shopping online, you know. So some companies, even if you watch, right, if you watch the way major corporations move, a lot of corporations have already adopted that very mindset. Walmart, for example, you can shop online. And then someone will bring it out to you, right? It won't be long before, you know, they have a robot probably bringing it out to you, right? So can you imagine an environment where a world where 90% of work is done in a virtual type setting or involves some type of virtual employment, right? And then we have the other 10%. Those are people like doctors or nurses and people that you actually have to have face-to-face contact with. However, there are even some essentials, you know, that are still in a virtual setting. You know, we have companies like telehealth and teledoc, right, where you can call in and talk to the doctor and say, hey, I have a runny nose, my temperature is X, Y, and Z. And they're like, oh, okay, I just wrote your script, you know, pick up this, you know, whatever the prescription is. I'm not a doctor, okay. But, you know, pick this up and you know, be well in 5 days, right? So our society, every age has, I was just talking to my husband about this the other day, I was saying every age has its own thing, right? You know, with the Great Depression and with when we had steel workers and in industrial age, like we have, every age comes with its own very set of culture shift, right? And I talk with my hands, I'm so used to presenting in person, right? But every age has its own thing, right? And so I think what the age that we're in right now is really embracing this technology and saying, okay, how do we shift with that? How do we get the most out of this age, right? And so one quote, and I'm a quoter, right? So one quote that I like to talk through this is, you know, if you want to understand today, look at yesterday, look at some of the things. So look at history. Let's look at how people have adopted and adapted in specific situations where technology is concerned. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Amanda. So that's one of the questions I want you to ponder on throughout this webinar is, if my business had 90% of my staff remote, what would they be doing and how would our business model change, right? According to Global Workforce Analytics and Flex Jobs, we can see an increasing trend over, the last 10, 20 years that, people more and more are going remote and work from home, right? So over the last 12 years, we did 159% work from home. These jobs are slowly transitioning to work at home. Over the last 4 years, we added on another 44% to that, right? So we slowly see that as we embrace more and more technology, more and more companies, call centers in specific, right? Because that's really my niche market, really is contact centers. So companies that have contact centers, we see more and more contact centers sending their agents and sending their admin staff to work at home. And Katie and Amanda and Rachel and I and Lynn, we were having a conversation yesterday, and we were talking about some of those reasons are not even because of COVID or because of things like that. A lot of it is we want to save cost, right? Like if I have a smaller space, right? Or if I have a space that I don't own and I just lease this space, then I don't have to have a higher light bill. It's many reasons that companies want to adopt this virtual environment. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Amanda. Okay, so whatever that reason may be for your organization for why you want to adopt a remote environment, right, or a virtual environment, it could be to save costs. It can be to be able to pivot very quickly and continue to still serve your customer. It can be because you're changing your product and service and you simply don't need on-site staff. It could be for whatever reason. You have to search your company, search your business plan to figure out, why a remote makes sense for you. But there are many reasons that remote and even if it's not a complete remote workforce, right? It may be partial, where maybe 70% is remote and 30% is on site, or even 30% is remote and 70 is on site, right? Whatever that reason is, right? You just want to make sure that you're thinking about those types of things. You don't want to get into a situation like we are now, right? Where we have stay-at-home orders and then business completely stops. We want to learn, like Pearl Buck says, we want to look at yesterday, which today will be yesterday, right? And we want to learn from that. We want to learn from what can I do better today? So taking in consideration us moving forward and moving into a remote environment, what type of technology needs are these larger companies they've already done this, they've already, succeeded in having remote staff, what are they using for technology? All right, so let's look through those types of things, okay? And I'm going to keep this high level so that, we can get through the deck, right? Go ahead, Amanda. So I want us to really think for a second about, again, I'm a quoter. I thought this quote was so good, right? Douglas Adams said, first we thought a PC was a calculator, then we found out how to turn numbers into letters, and we thought it was a typewriter, and then we discovered graphics and thought it was a TV, and with the internet we realized it was a brochure. So what I got from this quote, or took from this quote, is how technology is ever evolving, and as it evolves we find new uses and new things we can do, right? And so I thought that was such a appropriate quote for us here. Go ahead, Amanda. So some technology needs that you're going to need to support, some technology that you're going to need to support in remote workforce is, and again, this is not the end all be all, right? But these are some of your core components to supporting a remote workforce, especially once it starts getting vast, multiple people. One of them is going to be what you commonly hear referred to as a VPN, right? Is a virtual private network. Okay. And what the purpose of the virtual private network is really to be able to filter information and provide just a single highway into your business environment, right? So that it's less likely that people are able to hack and be able to take your information outside of your environment, outside of your network, right? So if you're in maybe law or real estate or something that healthcare or different things like that, these are the types of industries that really rely on VPNs to make sure that their employees, their remote employees, have a very secure way to get into their network. Okay, so you'll have freelancers, or if you're in a business of doing, like consulting or graphics or things like that, you may not have as high of a need for a VPN or something like that. However, as your environment shifts and you find that your products and services may shift, you may find that you have a need for a VPN network. Okay. Also, this is a very common one. I'm probably not teaching you anything new with this one, right? Voice over internet protocol. People refer to it as the phone, right? But it's really a way to be able to have multiple lines, and it's provided over internet services rather than having a hard landline. And so this allows us, so think about companies like 8x8, think about companies like that, even Bright House actually has a VoIP, is what is commonly referred to, or VoIP. You hear people refer to it as VoIP, and this is voice over internet. So it allows you to not have to have hardware and drilling in your walls, because if you have a remote workforce, they're not going to want their whole home turned into a construction site, right, to have lines drilled. So providing a Jabber, a Cisco Jabber or 8x8 or something of that nature allows you to be able to conduct or manage or support, I'll say, a remote environment. And then collaboration tools. This is probably my absolute favorite, right? Collaboration tools. Amanda's like, you need to hurry up. No, I'm just joking. I'm joking. No, collaboration tools, right? Collaboration tools are going to be important, right? This is Zoom. This is a collaboration tool because, and Lynn will get into this later, right? Being able to manage and motivate your staff, you will notice that a lot of your staffers, they're going to be like, man, I don't know how to work in this environment. I'm not inspired. I'm not engaged. How do you keep them engaged? Well, you keep them engaged by doing this type of stuff, having collaborative type of tools, whether it's Zoom, whether it's Microsoft SharePoint, whether it's Teams, utilizing the Google Drive, ways in which we're not in the same society where you have to walk over to the file cabinet and pull out files, right? You can utilize Google Drive for that, or some kind of secure drive space, right? And that allows you to have workers anywhere, right? Whether that's in the Philippines or whether that's here in the States, or even in your same city, right? They can be able to all collaborate, all use tools and work together for the common good of the organization. So collaboration tools is probably my absolute favorite of the technologies, because it allows us to still work in a very cohesive environment and still be engaged. Now you can go to the next slide, Amanda. So keys to remember when picking out technologies. Technology, I want to say this, technology is not a one size fit all. As a matter of fact, we have many clients that hire us just to come in to procure technology for their company, because technology, again, is not a one size fit all. There are many things that you need to take into consideration when you're picking out specific technology for your organization. So don't fall into the, well, my brother's construction company is using it, so we should use it too. Well, you're a doctor's office. You're not going to have the same technology needs that your brother's construction company is going to have, right? So there are things that you need to consider, like HIPAA or whatever those different things are that you need to consider. So technology is not a one size fit all, but these are some 3 keys to remember when thinking about what technology should I pick. One is going to be scalability. All right, so this is how Fortune 500s think when they're thinking about what technology they want to pick. Scalability, and scalability is going to speak to how easy it is to go from 0 to 100. right? So say, for example, you're picking out a VPN tool or voice over internet VoIP, tool, right? How easy is it for you to go from 1 user to 500 users or 1,000 users, right? Because as your business grows and as your business needs change, you may need to scale. And if that tool does not have, or the subscription, if you're using a cloud-based tool or software as a service, if that subscription does not have that ability to scale, then you get to your max break point and then you can no longer use the tool. So now you have to convert over to a new tool and so forth and so on, right? And so you want to really begin with the end in mind when you're thinking about the tools that you're going to pick. However, this is the caveat. However, you may not always be able to afford the end in mind, right? And so that's okay, right? So if you know, hey, this is really the tool that I see our organization growing to and really needing, I can say the same for us with, Solid Rock, right? With Infusionsoft is one of the CRM tools that I really like and would like to use, but we just don't have a real need for it right now. And cost is really, it can be expensive, at least the last time I looked at it. However, I know the break point for the current CRM tool that we use. So because I'm aware of that, I'm constantly thinking, okay, when we get to that layer, that's when I need to start thinking about pivoting and transitioning to another tool. So you just want to, even if you can't afford, or it's not feasible because not even funny money wise, but it's just not practical for you to have that new tool or that larger tool, you need to know what the break point is or what the cap is so that you know when you're nearing transition. Okay. Integration is going to be the next thing that you want to think about. Integration speaks to how easy it can connect to other tools. So if you're picking out a payroll tool, if you're picking out a VoIP tool, a voice over internet, how easy is it to integrate with your CRM tool or your time clock keeping system or whatever that is going to be? How easy is it for it to plug in? And so you'll hear people refer to API, which is an integration connection point, right? Does the tool that you're picking have that ability to connect? So if you're using something like QuickBooks for your accounting, does that connect automatically to your scheduling software, right? So when people schedule appointment, it automatically invoices them. So you want to be thinking about integration. There are a lot of tools that are your primary tools that won't integrate simply because of limitations, because of HIPAA or different things. So depending on the industry that you're in, you may have wall blocks between that tool and another tool. And so then you have to create process around that. Okay, so integration is the next one, and then I'll leave you with this one. Feasibility is going to be your last one. It doesn't matter how good a tool is if it's not easy to use, right? Or if you can't train your staff on how to use it, doesn't matter how easy it is. I mean, how good it is. If people don't use it, then you're just throwing away technology money. Right? So you want to think about ease of use. How easy is it for my staff to adopt this new tool into our system? And what type of training do we need to do? Right? If it's going to take them a whole 4-year degree in order to learn how to use a tool, then that might not be a tool that you want to leverage within your business. However, if it's a critical tool that you need, then you now need to think about your hiring plan of, okay, we need to probably hire people with experience with this particular tool. Make sense? Okay, so let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So the next topic that we're going to talk through is when and who can work remote. Okay, go ahead, Amanda. So keep this in mind that successfully working from home is a skill. It's just like programming, designing, or writing. It takes time and commitment to develop that skill. So we're not using the restroom while we're on Zoom, right? Did you have everyone seen that Zoom meeting? Someone got up and they used the restroom while they're on Zoom. I'm like, it's a skill. It's definitely a skill that needs to be developed, right? Making sure that we remain focused. We're in a, so it is definitely a skill that has to be, developed and honed, right? So successfully working from home is a skill, just like anything else, programming, designing, writing, and it takes time to develop it. That's from Alex Turnbull. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, Amanda. So when we think about that it is a skill, who can work remote? So these are just some of them. There's plenty others, right? But employees who don't need to engage with customers face to face. Right? Employees who don't have any facilities responsibilities like security, plumbing, those type of things. It's going to be kind of hard to do plumbing remotely, right? So those are people who can't really work remote, right? Sales positions like real estate agents and insurance agents, so those types of positions, a lot of times they can work remote, or part of their day can be remote. Administrative positions, very much so, like consulting or my role. A lot of my work I do is remote. So even, I've traveled last year I did over 65 flights. So I did a lot of, work in other places, but I did a lot of remote work as well. Freelance positions, freelancers, you'll see that they work remote. Gig workers, a lot of times gig workers, also known as freelancers, are in a remote environment and they're working remote. Okay, so one thing I want you to keep in mind here with who can work remote and working remote is that, again, it is a skill. It has to be developed. A lot of times when employers will send their staff to work remote, they will see productivity decrease. Okay, and it's decreasing because they're not engaged. However, once they've honed that skill, work at homers actually become more productive than people who work on site. And it's because they're right there. It's really actually hard to unplug once you are home. You're like, I'm right here, I'm at home. It's not like I have an hour commute home. I cooked on my lunch break, so they end up becoming more productive, but it is a skill that they have to hone. And it does take engagement from the leadership team to make sure that they're providing them with the technology to collaborate. They're providing them with these type of environments to have meetings, still see my face, and all of those different types of things. So in a nutshell, anyone can really work remote as long as they don't require face-to-face engagement with the customer or consumer of some sort. They don't have facilities types of responsibilities. They don't have to set an alarm. They don't have to do plumbing. They don't have to do security, those types of things. Sales positions and the other ones that were listed here. And I'm sure there are a host of others, but these are some of the key ones. Okay. So next on the list is managing and motivating remote staff. And so without further ado, I will turn this over to Lynn Johnson. She is excellent. Again, you heard a little bit about her earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to her and she will finish up the deck for us. Go ahead, Lynn.
Thank you, Juanita. Thank you so much for that. Well, I come in after you've decided the right technology to use, after you've decided who can work remote, what position is best to make remote. It's important that organizations and companies, small or large, understand that their employees are essential to their success, especially during this time. Companies are having to do something that they're not typically doing. And so in order for them to be successful during this time, they need to understand that their employees are there to assist them at being successful. And so we need to also manage and motivate these employees so that they continue to do the work that you hired them to do, that they continue to be successful, that they continue to be high performing. Because you don't want this time to cause your company to lack your momentum, lack in your competitive advantage. So it's very important that we manage and motivate our staff. So I chose this quote. Since Juanita's a quote person, I chose this quote and I took it from Castaway. So Tom Hanks says, I gotta keep breathing because tomorrow the sun will rise. Who knows what the tide will bring? This is a great quote, and it some might think it's strange that I even use this quote, but especially with Tom Hanks and his wife actually contracting COVID-19 while they're in Australia. And so the shift from working remote can be much more disruptive than we may think it is. And so remote workers often feel like castaways. They often feel like they've been kind of pushed aside and that they're all alone. And they can go into, sometimes, and studies show that remote workers can become depressed during this time. So that's why managing and motivating your staff during this time is very important. It can be definitely a transition for them. So studies have shown that high-performing employees may experience declines in job performance, decline in engagement when working from home. And if we keep this in mind as we're going through this time, and as Juanita has stated before, it's not just COVID-19. You may feel the need to go remote for your business practice. So we want to keep these few things in mind, because remember, when you're away from your employees, you can't notice their mood. You can't notice if there are situations that are brewing or occurring because you're not present with them. So one thing, and go ahead and go to the next slide, Amanda. So we want to make sure that we promote frequent face-to-face contact when we are in a remote work environment. Now, we understand that there is no substitute for personal face-to-face interaction. We all understand that. But with technology and some of the things that Juanita has already talked about, it's at our fingertips, and there are several ways that we can actually keep our employees connected even when they're actually not in the office. And so, for example, if you have lead workers in your organization, and you can encourage them to have face-to-face one-on-one meetings with their team, maybe once a week, whatever it might be, encourage that face-to-face contact. Juanita touched on some of the platforms: Zoom, GoToMeeting, Skype. There's also mobile platforms using things like Slack. So there's different platforms that you could actually use in order to promote this frequent face-to-face contact. Another thing that we want to keep in mind is to provide a consistent platform for effective communication. Keyword in that, as you can see, it's highlighted in bold, is consistent platform. And so this effective communication, though, first has to start with a plan. Before you can actually provide this consistent platform for effective communication, you want to establish a plan of how you will actually communicate with your team. And also a plan of how your team is going to communicate with your stakeholders. How are they going to communicate with your suppliers? How are they going to communicate with your customer? How are they going to communicate with your creditors? Whoever that stakeholder may be, there has to be a plan first of all. And then when we look at this, we have to determine the best mode of communication. Is it going to be by phone? Is it going to be by email? Is it going to be video conference? Is it going to be instant messaging? Something may be urgent and you don't have time for a face-to-face video call. So you may do an instant message. You may text them. As long as your team understands the modes of communication, they understand that it may be coming from different areas, different ways. You want to make sure that your employees know how to use the communication methods that you choose, the communication platform that you choose. Make sure that everybody understands it, and if they don't, train them on it so that they understand why you chose this method and how it's going to help them do their job better, right? Schedule regular communication with your staff. Regular communication, that's where that consistency comes into place. Especially during this time, as you can see, even with our government during COVID, this COVID-19 that we are currently in, They're doing daily briefings, daily house briefings. Why? Because they want to keep that consistency so that you're understanding that, hey, yeah, I may have said the same thing that I said yesterday, but I want you to know that we're still thinking about it and we're still working on it and we're all in this together and we're going to succeed and we're going to come out on the other end stronger. So you want to make sure that you provide this consistent platform, whether it's meetings every morning. I know my daughter's working from home and they have morning meetings. Real quick, 5-10 minute meetings, just to say, hey, okay, this is what the day is going to look like, okay? And if I go back real quick just to stakeholders, your suppliers, your customers, your creditors, if you work for the government, whatever it might be, make a list of who actually needs to be updated with information. You want to make sure that you know who these stakeholders are. You need to know what employees are actually going to be communicating with those particular stakeholders. A common thing that happens with some modes of communication is stakeholders get multiple communications from multiple different people. So they sometimes don't know who is, who am I actually listening to, responding to. So you want to make sure that they have that line of communication with somebody specifically that they're going to always be communicating with, and this person is going to always be updating them. Assist your employees with time management. This is another thing that we want to help our employees, especially during this time. And I put this here because working from home has its opportunities for employees to be productive. Studies have shown that employees are more productive at home or working remotely. Studies have shown that. But just think about what's going on right now today with COVID-19. Distractions. They're working remote, but they're home. They got kids running around. They have the husband who might be home with them. Lord knows I have one. Okay, so we have distractions that have now been thrown into the mix of working remotely. And we have to understand and help our employees understand that they still have to produce a product for you as the organization, that they still have to work through the distractions. So help them create manageable to-do lists. It's okay. Have it in a platform. Use project management platforms if you have to. Asana, there's another one. The name just left me. But there are multiple platforms out there that you can use that employees can have to-do checklists, but that you can also see as well if everybody has access to it. So help them create manageable to-do lists. Create project goals with deadlines. You want to encourage them, this is a big one, to stay from doing personal tasks. Because at home, we're at home. And especially with the stay-at-home order, you heard Juanita said, at lunch I cooked dinner. Well, what if dinner's not done during lunchtime? Then you have to get up and go check on the meal and do all these kinds of things. These are distractions. So you want to make sure that you keep those, help your team keep those at a minimum, help them build in break times. This really helps your employees. And also use daily task updates. This is very, very important so that you know that your team is still being productive. So that if they understand that, hey, I have to get the work done because at the end of the day, I have to provide an update to my manager or my team lead, right? To say, hey, this is what I did today. All right, so that's something that's very, very important. But there are countless time management techniques out there. There are actually lots of them. And so a needs assessment will actually really help define what actually works best for your actual organization. And then another one, to recognize your remote workers. Guys, engagement is all about recognizing your high performers, continuing. Don't let sending them remote keep you from recognizing them for the hard work that they do for your organization. It's very important that you keep that up. And you do that in a way where it's visible. Not that they see, but also your other employees see, because then that can be something that they would want to achieve so that they also get that recognition. So make sure that you continue to recognize them, make it a point to do it. I read something the other day, I'm gonna read it to you. It says, identifying strengths, build on that strength, that specific strength in the future. Just think about that. Building, identifying or acknowledging your employee's strength, you establish a foundation for building on that strength in the future. Well, what does that mean? Existing strengths are starting points for developing new strengths and new capabilities, not just for the employee, but for your organization. So it's very important that we also recognize our employees. And last in this arena is feedback. Feedback is two-way feedback. Feedback is not just one way. I cannot say that enough. It's a two-way street. So as companies, actively solicit opinions and encourage your employees to see you as a partner, not just a boss. Not just a boss. Let them know, just like I said with the COVID-19 and the government consistently speaking with us, one thing that they have stated over and over and over again is, hey, we are in this together as a nation. And that's what your employees want to hear. Hey, we might not get it right the first time. You know, let me know what can work better. We're here to work together. We're all in this together, right? And you can only do that if you've developed a relationship that promotes feedback. All right, you can go to the next slide, Amanda. All right, so what you want to do in order to take this to the next level is you want to ask yourself, hey, what inspires my employees? What bores them? What makes them stressed out? When do my employees need my assistance so that I can be there to assist them when they need it? What's important here is getting to know your people. How do you engage your people? You cannot engage your people if you do not know your people. It's like being in a relationship with you and your significant other or you and your spouse. How do you keep them engaged in the relationship? Well, it's because you know them. You know what they like, you know what they don't like, right? So you want to keep them engaged by making sure that you know them personally. All right, you can go to the next slide, Amanda. Okay, so we'll just jump right in because once you manage them, you motivate them, now let's look at some training that can be done. As Juanita explained, the number of remote workers has skyrocketed in the last decade. And Jack Welch, in this quote here, puts it best. And Amanda, it says, an organization's ability to learn and to translate that learning into actions is the ultimate competitive advantage, right? So that just leads me right into say, hey, this training and development is a crucial strategy. So how can we do this? How can we train our remote staff? A lot of us know how to train our employees that we work with day to day in the office. You have training programs set up for them, but how do you actually train remote workers? It's a little bit different. So you want to modify your training approaches that you currently have. You want to make sure that you create simple, easy to access training approaches. Simple things like webinars, like what we're doing today, something very simple that they can access. Make sure that the topics that you choose are relevant to their work, their remote work. You think about this, you don't want to choose a training module for your remote workers that benefit employees that are not remote. Make sure everything is purposeful. All right. Make sure that the training opportunities are more accessible and that they are actually interactive. Then you want to develop specific outcomes to ensure that there has been a transfer of learning. This means to make sure that you are assessing what they have learned. through quizzes or worksheets, whatever it might be. And there also might be some employees some remote employees that might not be performing up to your expectations. So you want to also make sure that you are making those employees aware as well. Also make training a part of their growth plan. And employees don't want to take training that's not going to help them in their current job or prepare them for something in the future. So make training purposeful, all right? That's very important to do so that the employee feels that, hey, I am growing in this process. And I want to touch on something real quick that Juanita said. She said that, that working remotely is a skill. So think about your employees that are learning how to work remote. They are coming out of this COVID-19 with more skills. What does this do? It makes them more marketable. Let's be honest, right? So that's where that engagement comes in. That's where that relationship building comes in, because your employees are also going to come out of this with saying, hey, I like this remote thing. I might not want to go back to the way it used to be. So you want to keep them engaged, and you want to make sure that they are learning what they need to learn to be successful, but for you, your organization, not somebody else's organization. And then, of course, give that explicit and detailed feedback for different projects that they do. Make sure that you're talking to them consistently about their work product, that they understand what they're doing well and what they're not doing well, how we can fix it in the future, those types of things. And then remember that this remote interaction is not as colorful as if we were face-to-face. So you want to make sure that you're very direct with your employees. And last, you want to implement gamification. This is something that Juanita really loves. You know, gamification is something that is a new way of presenting information to employees that educates them, but also entertains them. And people love games. People love friendly competition, you know, in the workplace. So gamification methods are visually engaging. You can set up prizes and rewards for them being productive. So based on their performance, you will reward them or give them prizes based on how you set this up. Again, it's what works best for your organization. What's the need for your organization? So ask yourself, do you have any new remote workers who are not working out as expected? Think about things. Check your expectations with actually the reality of the workplace. Determine if there's any breakdown in the process, breakdown in the training, so that you can fill and fix the gaps. All right, so policies and best practices. All right, this is another one we got to keep in mind, that policies and best practices are not a one-size-fits-all. Every organization has their own needs. It's based on your culture. It's based on your consumer. It's based on your industry. You can go to the next slide, Amanda. But one thing that we can all agree on is it takes less time to do things right than to explain why you did it wrong, right? And when we talk about compliance, this is something that's very important. You can go to the next slide, Amanda. So here are just some common questions that you might want to consider when having your employees be remote. Does remote staff conflict with consumer needs? It's very important to understand that. How can I be sure that employees are staying productive, working regular hours, making sure you establish plans and goals and identifying how you're going to communicate with them, making sure that you are taking steps to track what they're doing at work, right? And what do I need to consider when managing non-exempt employees remotely? This is where it gets a little sticky, right? So you want to make sure that your non-exempt employees know their expectations, their working hours, right? You want to make sure that they're not working outside of their normal working hours. You want to make sure that they're calculating their working hours. So for instance, what this just means is the time you start work until the time you end work. So work starts when you sit down and you start your computer, right? So it's important that our non-exempt employees understand that, set expectations, length of time for breaks, all of those things that you want to consider when you're working with non-exempt employees. Now, how do I comply with reasonable accommodation requirements? We always have to keep in mind ADA, right? But this is different for every organization, right? Yes, we know the law, we know what it means, but when an employee comes to you and they ask you to make a work accommodation, discuss it, identify what is needed, if anything is needed, and what's reasonable, right? Make sure that you're adhering to the compliance regulations when it comes to ADA, especially during this time with COVID. And then last, what should be included in a remote work policy? It's important that we understand that you need to have an airtight policy, airtight. So you need to include things like their availability requirements, their responsiveness, production measurements, rightful termination, all of these things that you would have in your regular in the office policy, you need those for your remote workers as well. It's important that we do that. So employees have various rights, they have various protections under the law, but it depends on your organization what actually fits and works for you. So think about what employee laws apply to your organization, and do you have the policies in place to actually to adhere to those compliance requirements. And I know I probably talk pretty fast. I can go on and on and on about the things that I love to talk about, and so I'll turn it back over to Juanita.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I'm going to go ahead, and that was all great information. I'm going to turn it over to Katie because I know there are some questions that are going to be coming into the chat.
So thank you both. Lynn and Juanita, that was a lot of information, and I know that we've had a couple of questions come in. Rachel has been kind of looking at things. Rachel, is there any questions that we need to fire up? I'm conscious that we're down to our last kind of 6 minutes here, be mindful of time. But to everybody that's on the call, know that we have recorded the call. We will endeavor to get this out to you at some point today. We'll also list it on our website too. And obviously, I want to say a huge shout out to Solid Rock Consulting. This is definitely our chamber members working together at its finest. Juanita reached out to me and said, how can we help? And so putting this together, I think is a wonderful contribution to helping our business community. And I know that they will be there to follow up with any questions we don't get time to address today. So Rachel, what's come in on the questions?
Yes, we have a few questions. The first question is coming in from Peggy, and she's asking if there's an example of a remote work policy.
Yeah, so some things that you want to take in consideration when you're thinking about your remote work policy are some of the things that Lynn mentioned, but one of the things also that you definitely want to consider as far as putting in your remote policy is your technology requirements. Like, are you going to require them to have the technology? Are you going to provide them with the technology? And having those sign-offs, right? Making sure that they sign off. Usually when I go into a company and we are sending for business continuity purposes agents home to work from home, we have them sign off their technology compliance, that they won't, get on this site or they won't get on that site, and also that they will bring back the equipment, right? But as far as a sample document, though there are different ones that you can Google and that we can help you with putting together if that's something that you would be interested in. Great question.
Yes.
Rachel, what else?
Question is from Laura, and she's asking if you have any recommendations for gamification resources.
Oh, by the way, I just got to say, gamification is a new word to me, and I'm totally stealing it. I'm going to use it for the rest of this thing. I think that's awesome.
Gamification is a thing that has come around in this last, maybe I'll say 10 to just be, generous, but probably more so 5. And it's, companies are really still adapting to it. But gamification has to, some tools, one tool that sticks out in mind really quickly is Nuvo, or is Nugeno. And it implements things like scorecards, it implements things like that, so that agents can be able to see their metrics and and not just agents, but employees, right? Again, my niche is really contact centers, but we deal with all types of organizations. But it allows them to be able to see their metrics, how they're performing. It allows companies to be able to do contests and different things like that. It puts it in a nice, really good interface. So when you're thinking about gamification for your company, you want to think about the interface, because again, people are not going to use it if it looks old and raggy, for lack of better words, right? If it's not something that's intuitive and people are not drawn to use it, it doesn't have bright colors or whatever the case may be, then people are not going to use it. So you want to think about that. How do I implement what their metrics are, and how I want to hold them accountable? How do I introduce that in a very fun, lively, and engaging way?
Exactly. And also keep in mind that gamification could go wrong. So you have to make sure that you pick what works best for your employees and your organization, because it can go way wrong real fast. So
that goes back to your point about knowing your team.
Knowing your team, exactly. Yeah. Because some teams you can't compete because it can go way wrong real fast. So just be mindful of that as well.
Perfect. Rachel, do we have anything else coming in?
Yes, Matina is asking if there is a list of tips for maintaining and improving productivity.
Do we have a list? So we try to stay away from, Matina, we try to, personally as a consulting firm, we try to stay away from very generic type of things, just because we customize our solutions very specific to the organization, because we consult from startup all the way to very, large grand scale that I was talking about earlier. So we try to keep very generic things off the table. However, we do business needs assessments all the time. So if it's something that you're looking for very specific to your organization, we would love to talk to your organization and kind of put something custom together for your organization.
Exactly. And it doesn't take a whole lot of time at all. It's just really sitting down with you, talking with you, finding out what your organization, who you are as an organization, and build something specifically for you.
Perfect. And I do just want to say, Arti Renee Pajecki is on the call. She's our chamber board chair right now, and she just posted a link in the questions piece there for some potential sample policies. If everybody can see that, but I'll send that out to everybody that's on the call too. So thank you to Arti Renee, and Amanda Hernandez is also on the call from Spectrum, and I can send out her contact details, because she's like, I know that it can be difficult to get through to the contact centers right now to set up work from home internet accounts, and Amanda can help you all with that. So thank you to Amanda for that too. I'll make sure everybody that's on the call gets both the link from Arti and the Amanda's contact details. Thank you, ladies, for sharing.
Our final question comes from Rhonda, and she's asking if there are any big differences to consider while dealing with nonprofit volunteers versus staff.
That's a really great question, Rhonda. Actually, no, there's not from a technology standpoint, right? The technology and the capability of being able to work from home or work remote, right? Because working remote doesn't always necessarily mean you work from home, right? There's some companies that have remote staff, and their remote staff uses a co-sharing space because they have kids that they homeschool or whatever the case may be. So remote work does not always mean that you work from home. So that needs to be something that you consider. But is there a great difference or a big difference in someone, a company that is for-profit or not for profit, not necessarily. They're still an organization. The technology needs are going to be fairly similar. The only difference you're going to probably find is in their status of employment, right? Whether they are a contract worker, whether they are a volunteer, and then that is something that you're going to handle within your HR spectrum of things.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I know that we are right on time. So again, I want to thank you all for dialing in. I know there's a lot going on right now and there's a lot of information flying at you. And so I appreciate the time that you took to be with us. Juanita and Lynn, thank you again. Solid Rock Consulting is an amazing partner with us, and I look forward to doing lots more of these to help our members. You've all had that screen on there with their telephone number and their email, but I will send that out as well. So thank you all for participating. This is the end of this webinar.
Bye.